8:06 in the morning. Below deck on the battleship Arizona, sailors are lined up for breakfast. Coffee, eggs, the smell of a Sunday morning. Then the ship simply stops existing. A single bomb finds the forward magazine. 1.5 million pounds of gunpowder detonate at once. The deck lifts. The hull splits open. Men who were holding a coffee cup 1 second earlier are gone the next. 1,177 of them will never leave that ship. It happens in less time than it takes to read this sentence. And here is the part that should make your blood run cold. America saw this coming 3 times. A destroyer sank a Japanese submarine outside the harbor 90 minutes before the bombs fell. And the warning was doubted. A radar station picked up a wave of incoming aircraft the size of nothing anyone had trained for. And the warning was dismissed in under a minute. And in Washington, the Army's top general personally wrote out an urgent warning to Hawaii. And it was sent by the slowest method available, arriving on a bicycle, hours after the harbor was already burned. 3 warnings, 3 failures. One morning that changed the world. This is how it happened, hour by hour, warning by warning, and why nobody stopped it in time. To understand this morning, you have to understand the year that led to it. By the fall of 1941, the United States and the Empire of Japan are sliding toward war, and almost everyone in Washington knows it. Japan has been fighting in China for 4 years. Its army has pushed into French Indochina. Its ambitions stretch across the entire Pacific. America has answered with pressure, an oil embargo, frozen assets, a demand that Japan withdraw from China or lose access to the fuel its entire navy depends on. For Japan, this is a slow strangulation. Without imported oil, its fleet stops moving within about a year and a half. Inside the Imperial Japanese Navy, one admiral has a plan that terrifies even his own government. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto studied at Harvard. He has traveled across America. He knows exactly how large this country is and exactly how much industry it can bring to a war, if given the time to build it. He tells his superiors in private that Japan cannot win a long war against the United States. So he proposes something else. Not a long war, a single decisive blow. Cripple the American Pacific Fleet in one strike. Buy Japan 6 months, it may be a year, to seize everything it needs in the Pacific before America can recover. His target, the fleet's home anchorage in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, 6 aircraft carriers, more than 400 aircraft, a task force that will cross 4,000 miles of open ocean under total radio silence, hoping no one notices it at all. Thousands of miles away in Washington, American codebreakers are reading Japan's diplomatic messages almost as fast as Tokyo can send them through a program called MAGIC, one of the most closely guarded secrets in the country. Through it, officials can see negotiations collapsing. They can see the tone turning cold, then hostile. 10 days before the attack, on November 27th, Washington does send a warning to every Pacific command, Hawaii included. It uses the word war outright, but it tells commanders to expect sabotage from within. Spies, saboteurs, local unrest, not a carrier strike from across the ocean. In response, aircraft at Hawaii's airfields are pulled out of their scattered defensive positions and parked wingtip to wingtip in tight rows. In the open, where they're easier to guard against a saboteur on foot, it will also make them impossible to miss from the air. The warning that was sent aims at the wrong danger entirely, and the danger it misses is already at sea, moving closer every hour. Just 11 days before the attack, on November 26th, Secretary of State Cordell Hull hands Japan's diplomats a final proposal: complete withdrawal from China and Indochina in exchange for lifting the embargo. From Washington's side, it's a demand for Japan to stop an ongoing war of conquest. From Tokyo's side, sitting across the table, it reads as an ultimatum with no room left to negotiate, a demand to give up everything the military has fought for since 1937, or face economic collapse. Japan's leadership reads it exactly that way. The following day, the strike force ordered toward Hawaii is already moving. Both governments will spend the rest of the war, and decades after it, arguing about which side left the other no choice at all. What's not in dispute is what happens next. On November 26th, 6 Japanese carriers slip out of a remote, fog-bound anchorage in the Kuril Islands and turn east into open ocean. Every radio transmitter aboard every ship is sealed. Some crews go as far as physically removing the fuses, so no operator can send so much as an accidental signal, even by mistake. For 11 days, this armada crosses one of the emptiest stretches of the Pacific, deliberately choosing a northern route that commercial shipping almost never uses. The seas turn violent. Refueling ships at sea, in swells this rough, is dangerous work. Sailors are swept overboard on other missions for exactly this reason. Here, it succeeds only because it has to. Twice, lookouts spot the running lights of what might be a neutral merchant ship on the horizon. Twice, the fleet alters course in silence and lets the darkness swallow it again. Not one American patrol plane, not one radio intercept, not one alert coastal watcher ever sees them coming. On the morning of December 2nd, a single coded message reaches the fleet from Tokyo. Climb Mount Nitaka. It means the attack is authorized. There's no turning back now. By December 6th, the task force reaches its final launch position, 230 miles north of Oahu. Close enough now that failure is no longer a question of distance. It is only a question of whether anyone on the other side is watching. 6:45 in the morning, Hawaii time. Still dark. The destroyer USS Ward is patrolling the mouth of Pearl Harbor when her lookouts spot something. A small conning tower, breaking the surface, trailing a Japanese supply ship toward the harbor entrance, trying to slip in behind it, unnoticed. It is a Japanese midget submarine, 2-man crew, a torpedo tube built to hit exactly what's anchored inside that harbor. Ward's captain doesn't hesitate. Guns open fire. A depth charge finishes the job, and the small submarine sinks in deep water off the harbor mouth. At 6:53, Ward radios in the first shots fired by the United States in the Pacific War, 90 minutes before a single bomb falls from the sky. The message reaches the duty officer on shore. He is skeptical. False submarine sightings have happened before. Nerves have been high for weeks. Nobody wants to trigger a fleet-wide alarm over what might turn out to be a whale or a training exercise gone wrong. And after all, the warning from 10 days earlier was about sabotage on the ground, not an attack from the sea or the air. A submarine doesn't fit the danger anyone has been told to watch for. So the report is passed up the chain, cautiously, for verification, while officers try to confirm a story that sounds almost too strange to believe. It is still crawling through that verification process when the sky over Pearl Harbor fills with aircraft. The first warning, real, confirmed by an actual sinking, too slow and aimed at the wrong kind of danger to matter. 7:02 in the morning, 15 minutes after Ward's report starts its climb up the chain of command. At the Opana radar station, on the northern tip of Oahu, 2 young privates are technically off duty. Their shift ended at 7, but the truck to take them to breakfast hasn't arrived yet. So Private Joseph Lockard keeps the set running, mostly to train the newer man, Private George Elliott, on how to read it. The screen lights up, a formation larger than anything either of them has ever seen in training. Dozens of aircraft, sweeping in from the north, closing fast. Elliott wants to call it in immediately. Lockard, more experienced with the equipment, agrees this is worth reporting. The call reaches a young lieutenant named Kermit Tyler at the island's information center. He has almost no experience interpreting radar returns like this one. He knows one thing, though. A flight of American B-17 bombers is expected in from the mainland that very morning, and a formation that size would. He tells them not to worry about it. Lockard and Elliott keep tracking the formation for another 35 minutes anyway, watching it grow closer, before finally losing the signal in the clutter of the surrounding hills. By the time they lose it, the formation is less than 25 miles from Pearl Harbor. The second warning, seen with their own eyes, on their own screen, tracked for over half an hour, explained away in less than 1 minute. Back in Washington, The final section of a long Japanese diplomatic message arrives in the early hours of December 7th, 14 parts in total, addressed to Japan's ambassador in Washington. It isn't a declaration of war, not explicitly, but its tone makes one thing unmistakable. Negotiations are over. Attached to it is a strange instruction. Deliver this message to the American Secretary of State at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Washington time. An officer studies that instruction and realizes something. 1 o'clock in Washington is early morning in Hawaii, not long after sunrise, at Pearl Harbor. If Tokyo wants a message delivered at a precise hour on the other side of the world, something else is timed to happen at that same hour, somewhere. General George Marshall, the Army's highest-ranking officer, is informed. He personally drafts a warning and orders it sent to every Pacific command, Hawaii included, immediately. But the secure military radio link to Hawaii is down that morning. Atmospheric interference, of all things, on the one morning it matters most. So the warning goes out the only way left, as an ordinary commercial telegram, filed with Western Union, addressed to the Army's commander in Hawaii. It isn't marked urgent. It isn't marked secret. It drops into the normal Sunday morning delivery queue in Honolulu, alongside birthday cards and grocery bills. A young Western Union messenger named Tadao Fuchikami, a Japanese-American, born and raised in Hawaii, picks it up on his delivery run. He has no idea what he's carrying. He is still riding his bicycle through the streets of Honolulu when the first bombs fall. He hears the explosions. He looks up and sees smoke rising over the harbor before he's even reached his next stop. He keeps riding, delivery after delivery, through a city that is only just beginning to understand what's happening above it. He will not hand over that warning until the attack is already over. The third warning, written by the Army's top general, addressed and sealed with hours to spare. It loses the race to a boy on a bicycle. While all three warnings are quietly failing, on the other side of the Pacific, the attack is already committed. Aboard the 6 Japanese carriers, pilots wake before dawn. Some tie white cloth headbands around their foreheads, a mark of resolve. Some write final letters home, folded and left behind, in case they don't return. At 6:05, planes begin lifting off the decks into the darkness, 183 aircraft in the first wave alone. Leading them is Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, flying a high-altitude bomber, his flight jacket bright red so his own men can spot him easily in the chaos to come. Below the formation, Oahu is still waking up. Church bells are being readied for morning services. On the West Virginia, sailors are setting up chairs on deck for a 9 o'clock service that will never happen. At 7:55, the sky above the harbor is a clean, cloudless blue. Fuchida looks down and sees the entire Pacific Fleet laid out beneath him, exactly where his intelligence said it would be, exactly as it was left after the sabotage warning rearranged it into neat, unmissable rows. Not a single fighter rises to meet him. He keys his radio and sends 3 words back to the fleet, words that will be remembered for the rest of the century. Tora, 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 Tiger, Tiger, Tiger. Complete surprise, achieved. Seconds later, torpedo bombers drop low over the water and release. A sailor on deck looks up, confused, thinking it must be some kind of drill. Then he sees the rising sun painted on the wings. The first torpedoes tear into the battleship Oklahoma. Within minutes, she begins to roll, capsizing at her mooring with hundreds of men still trapped inside her hull, in total darkness as the water rises around them. Nearby, the old target ship Utah is also hit and begins to capsize, mistaken by some attacking pilots for a carrier. Dive bombers scream down out of the sky, ripping through rows of parked American aircraft at Hickam and Wheeler Field before a single one can be armed and launched. Planes lined up in the very rows ordered 10 days earlier to guard against a threat that never came. At 8:06, that single bomb finds the Arizona's forward magazine, and 1,177 men die in an instant, the moment this story opened with. Across the harbor, anti-aircraft crews scramble to reach ammunition that has been locked away exactly as peacetime regulations require. Watertight doors, left open for the weekend, now flood entire compartments in minutes. Not far away, at Kaneohe Naval Air Station, a chief petty officer named John Finn runs into the open under strafing fire and mans an exposed machine gun mount meant for training, not combat. He is hit again and again, by his own count more than 20 times, by shrapnel and bullets, and he does not leave that gun for the rest of the attack. For his actions that morning, John Finn will receive the Medal of Honor, the first one awarded for World War II. Smoke rises so thick over the harbor that pilots in the second wave can barely find fresh targets through it. On the ground in Honolulu, the chaos spreads even beyond the harbor itself. American anti-aircraft shells, fired in desperation at low-flying planes, arc over the city and fall back to earth in residential neighborhoods. By the time the smoke clears, dozens of Honolulu civilians will be dead or wounded, not from Japanese bombs, but from their own country's shells, coming down out of a sky nobody had time to aim carefully into. At Queen's Hospital in downtown Honolulu, doctors and nurses who came in for a quiet Sunday shift are suddenly flooded with burned and wounded sailors, arriving faster than beds can be found for them. Local civilians, many of them still in church clothes, line up outside to give blood before anyone has even finished explaining what's happening at the harbor. Radio stations that were playing music 20 minutes earlier now repeat the same message on a loop, telling every doctor, nurse, and off-duty serviceman on the island to report to their post immediately. This is not a drill. Back over the water, the second wave of Japanese aircraft is still working through the harbor, and the ships still burning inside it. In the middle of that chaos, ordinary sailors are making choices that will define how this day is remembered. Aboard the West Virginia, a mess attendant named Dorie Miller is collecting laundry when the first torpedo hits. Miller is a big man, a former high school football player from Texas. In the segregated Navy of 1941, black sailors like him are not permitted to train on weapons. His job is food service, not combat. None of that matters now. He carries wounded sailors to safety through smoke and burning oil. He moves his mortally wounded captain, Mervyn Bennion, to a more sheltered position, even as the captain refuses to leave his post and keeps directing the ship's defense from where he lies. Then Miller sees an anti-aircraft gun standing unmanned, its crew dead or scattered. He has never fired it. No one has ever taught him how. He grabs it anyway and keeps firing at the Japanese planes overhead until he runs out of ammunition. For his actions that morning, Dorie Miller will become the first black sailor in American history to receive the Navy Cross. A few hundred yards away, the battleship Nevada is the only capital ship able to get underway during the attack itself. Her crew fights to steer her clear of the harbor entrance, even as dive bombers concentrate on her, desperate to sink her in the channel and trap every other ship inside. On Nevada's deck, a young officer named Joseph Tausig, only 22 years old, is directing anti-aircraft fire when shrapnel tears into his leg, nearly severing it. He refuses to be carried below. He has himself propped upright on deck, tourniquet tightened by hand, and keeps directing his gun crews until the ship is finally out of danger. He will lose that leg, but not that morning, and not his command of it. Damaged and burning, Nevada's captain makes a decision in seconds: run her aground on purpose, rather than risk blocking the only way out for the rest of the fleet. By 9:55, less than 2 hours after it began, the attack is over. Behind it, 8 battleships sunk or damaged, nearly 200 aircraft destroyed on the ground, over 2,300 Americans dead, and hundreds more wounded in under 120 minutes. Commander Fuchida wants a third wave to finish off the harbor's fuel tanks and repair yard. Without them, the fleet could barely operate at all. But Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commanding the Japanese task force, decides the element of surprise is spent and the risk of an American counterattack too high. He orders the fleet to turn for home. Those untouched fuel tanks, that repair yard left standing, will keep the wounded Pacific Fleet fighting far sooner than Japan ever expects. while the harbor still burns, in Washington, D.C., two Japanese diplomats, Ambassador Kichisaburo Nomura and Special Envoy Saburo Kurusu, sit in an outer office, waiting. They were instructed to deliver their government's final message to Secretary of State Cordell Hull at exactly 1 o'clock, decoding delays inside their own embassy, where staff are still typing up the final, most sensitive part of the message by hand. Push that meeting back, again and again. They finally walk into Hull's office a little after 2 in the afternoon. By then, the attack in Hawaii is already over. Hull already knows. He reads their message, already aware of what has happened 7,000 miles away, and tells them, coldly, that in 50 years of public service, he has never seen a document more filled with falsehoods. The two men leave in silence. Even Japan's own attempt to formally end negotiations before the shooting started arrives late. The next morning, December 8th, President Franklin Roosevelt stands before a joint session of Congress. He calls the previous day a date which will live in infamy. Within an hour, Congress declares war on Japan, almost unanimously. 4 days later, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States, pulling America fully into the global conflict on both sides of the world at once. Overnight, the isolationism that had kept America on the sidelines for 2 years simply ceases to exist. Lines form outside recruiting stations before the offices even open. Factories that built cars begin building tanks. Shipyards that had launched 1 battleship a year begin turning out vessels by the dozens. Within 4 years, American industry will outproduce every other combatant nation on Earth combined. Not every consequence of that morning is a story of courage. In the weeks that follow, fear and suspicion turn against Japanese-American communities on the mainland, a chapter that will end in the forced removal and imprisonment of over 100,000 people, most of them American citizens, in the very country that had just been attacked. It is one of the darker threads this day leaves behind. An official investigation later lays out, in painful detail, exactly how the submarine report, the radar warning, and Marshall's telegram all failed to reach the right people in time. 2 of Pearl Harbor's top commanders, Admiral Husband Kimmel and General Walter Short, are relieved of duty within weeks. Their careers effectively ended by a morning none of them could stop alone. Tadao Fuchikami, the messenger boy, carries the weight of that undelivered telegram for the rest of his life, even though nothing he did and nothing he could have done would have gotten it there in time. Admiral Yamamoto, the man who planned the strike, reportedly warns his own government that they have only awakened a sleeping giant and filled it with a terrible resolve. He will not live to see how right he was. In 1943, American codebreakers, reading Japanese communications again, only this time acting fast enough, intercept his flight plans. His plane is shot down over the Pacific. The Arizona still rests where she sank, in the shallow water of the harbor, with more than 900 of her crew still entombed inside her hull. Every year, a slow trickle of oil still rises from her wreck to the surface. Sailors call it the ship still weeping, but the harbor itself refuses to stay dead. In the weeks after the attack, salvage crews work around the clock in the wreckage, pumping out flooded hulls, patching torn steel, refusing to let the fleet stay on the bottom of the bay. Of the 8 battleships hit that morning, 6 will eventually be repaired and returned to the war. The shallow water that let bombs find their targets so easily is the same shallow water that lets divers reach those hulls and bring most of them back. Less than 6 months later, in June of 1942, near a tiny atoll called Midway, some of those same repaired ships and their crews will help hand the Imperial Japanese Navy the defeat Yamamoto always feared, the one he tried to prevent by striking first. The sleeping giant he warned his own government about doesn't just wake up. It rebuilds itself out of its own wreckage and turns the war around within a year and a half of the morning meant to end it. 3 warnings reached American hands that morning: a sunken submarine, a screen full of dots, a telegram sealed and ready to go. It took only one of them arriving on time to have changed everything. None of them did. If a story like this reaches you, wherever you are watching or listening from tonight, tell us in the comments where in the world you're joining us from. Because more than 80 years later, a morning built on warnings nobody heard in time is still being told all across the world that it changed.